This is Baia on the southern coast of Italy near Naples. And for centuries, rulers and philosophers and writers like Homer and Virgil would visit here to explore a network of underground tunnels known as the Oracle of the Dead. Homer's hero Odysseus travelled up the west coast of Italy here to what he believed were the gates of Hades. It was quite literally a descent into hell.
The Oracle of the Dead at Baia was a sacred underground labyrinth which led the initiate down to the mythical river Styx. Once they crossed this, they had entered the underworld, in which they visited the Sibyl, or High Priestess, who was often a young virgin sat in a small torchlit chamber. Through her, you'd be able to communicate with your dead relatives, as well as the gods themselves. In essence, it was an ancient, elaborate, and very unsettling version of a modern psychic crossed with a scary Santa's grotto, and it was a hugely important part of the ancient world. The whole process was carefully managed by the priests and their assistants who ran these sites. It was deliberately designed to be disorientating for the initiate. It was dark, cramped, and really felt like a descent into hell. And this whole experience came at a price.
People in the ancient world were certainly very superstitious. I don't think humanity has particularly changed in that respect, but they were much more into their gods and their goddesses. They really thought that these deities were ruling the world, that everything was prescribed, if you like, and that if you went to the right places and spoke to the right people, that they would be able to tell you what was likely to happen in the future.
So this is it. This is Delphi. Right below me is the theater, and just beyond it, the Temple of Apollo, where priestesses would give prophecy. And just beyond the well-preserved temple is the navel stone, for legend has it that Delphi was located at the precise center of the earth.
Believing that the site was sacred, thousands of initiates would flock to Delphi every year in the hope of being able to see the oracle, who sat in a torchlight chamber underneath the Temple of Apollo.
And this is where she sat, just beyond these rocks here, about 2 meters in the ground. This was the chamber where she gave prophecy. And this was the chamber where she stood over a crack in the ground where volcanic fumes rose and enabled her to commune with the gods.
There would be a priest in the chamber with the oracle who would frantically write down what she was saying, but in most cases it was just gibberish. Nevertheless, it was his job to interpret her moans, grunts, and utterances and turn them into cohesive prophecies. It was little wonder that scholars today question its credibility, but at the time, it was the biggest show on Earth.
So Delphi was the oracle center of the rich and famous. I mean, this is not respectfully where peasants and farmers came to have their future told. On the contrary, the richest people in all the world would come here and make offerings. There's a very well-preserved Athenian treasure temple, a treasury where people from Athens would come with, incredible precious metals, gold and silver, and give gifts to the gods for the prophecies that they were going to receive.
It's still possible to go down into the underground chamber beneath the temple where the oracle sat. It's quite a tight squeeze, but once you get under the main stone platform, you can clearly see the passage that led to the oracle chamber. Unfortunately, earthquakes have collapsed the end of the passage, but it's still possible to get a sense of this subterranean labyrinth. When the initiates came down here, it must have been quite a mind-altering experience when you factor in the chanting, the oracle's shrieks, and the fumes.
How was that? That was amazing. That was so cool. Secret passage to the Temple of Apollo.
The Temple of Apollo and the whole Delphi site grew and grew over the centuries as more and more people came to visit. There were inns and bars and bathhouses and hundreds of small traders dotted across the hillside to service the tens of thousands of initiates and their companions. But Delphi had one fatal flaw. It was built on a huge geological fault line, including one which went through the center of the Temple of Apollo itself. The result was a series of huge earthquakes and fires which slowly but surely destroyed the site.
An earthquake was the real killer. In fact, a big one at the beginning of the 1st century BC decimated the area. I mean, look around me. The temples were in ruins. So everyone left. There was no reason to stay. The priests left. And what that did was it made the prophecies of the oracle, well, no longer credible. And Delphi slowly faded into history.
So was it all a big show designed to relieve people of their money, or was there some real spiritual connection being made? I think we can say with certainty that the rulers and citizens of ancient Rome believed in it with all their hearts.
In the ancient world, the oracles were absolutely fundamental to the ruling elite and their ability to make decisions about their nations. Nobody would make a decision without covering their bum first and consulting the oracle. It's not enough to talk to the Senate, because they all have their own agendas. You need to tick the box that you consulted the oracle. You consulted the gods before you went to war. What you didn't consult the oracle, you're out of here. You're assassinated. So it was a checklist that they had to do. And plus, it absolved them of any blame. Should it go wrong? I consulted the gods. They told me to invade. I believe it was more of a consultative effort, typically from the priest, occasionally from the Sibyl herself, but in all instances, it's pretty much them telling the quester, the initiate, what they think they need to hear.
The desire to know about our future, whether it be for love or money or work or even death, has fascinated us for centuries. The moment people, mostly women, set themselves up as prophets, we all came flocking, cash in hand, and the business of fortune-telling began. So, is there something to it, or is it simply a clever way of relieving us of our cash? Well, maybe it's a bit of both. I'll see you next time.